Happy Wednesday, everybody. It's Mr. Ben here. We're going to be working on our small moments stories again today. Um, we're doing something kind of fun, though. We're going to change our small moment story that happened to us, and we want to write. We want to switch it in our brains, and we want to write it from the perspective of the animal you've been studying in Maestro Jenny's class. So, um, whether that is a worm or a dog or tiger, no matter what your animal is, we're going to try to take uh, the small moment you thought of and the short paragraph you wrote and switch it so it sounds like it's coming from the animal you've been learning about. Okay? So, that can be a very tricky thing for us to understand. If we think about our book this week, hey there, hey there, little ant. Um, in the story, uh, they change perspectives. So part of the time, the ant is telling the story, so things look different. Remember, they were eating off a table, but the table was a bottle cap. They got dinner for everybody, but dinner only had to be one chip because the whole family of ants could be fed from one chip. Or they described the kid as being a giant because when you're a teeny tiny little ant, even a child looks like a giant to you. Okay, so that's what we want to try to do in our heads. We want to think about um, how these animals might act differently while still doing those same activities that we thought of in our small moments. So I thought of four different animals that I could do that with today. I'm going to show you what that might look like for a worm, a dog, a tiger, and a bird. Okay. This is just me showing you my thoughts going through this process. You are not going to do a slide that looks like this. You're going to do one just for your animal. I'll show you how to do that in the next video. This is just to give you some examples to help your brain think of how to switch this from something that happened to you, a human, uh, as to the perspective of an animal. So we're going to talk about this like we are that animal. So the first thing we have to do is remember the small moment you've been talking about. In your slideshow, it should be on any number of slides. I've added mine in here already. If you remember, the small moment I've been working with is last weekend, Jamie and I went for a walk at the pond near our house and we saw a muskrat. Okay, so now I want to think of that same exact small moment. How might I change that? How might I change the words so that it sounds like it's coming from the perspective of a worm? So we want to think about all of that research you've been doing in Miss Jenny's room. You guys have been learning so much. What can you use from your research about your animal that you could put into a make believe story? So, we're going to use some real facts that'll help us with our made up stories. So, last weekend, Jamie and I, we don't really have to change much there. If we're thinking about worms, we could be two worms going for a walk. But in my head, am I thinking like, do worms walk? And I don't think they really walk. They like wiggle, wiggly worms, or they kind of slither, maybe kind of like a snake. But uh, so if I'm thinking about worms, I'm going to say last weekend, Jamie and I, um, maybe we wiggled out of our tunnels. You know, we weren't by our home anymore because our home would be the tunnel. So last weekend, Jamie and I wiggled out of our tunnels. And then instead of going for a walk, maybe we slithered around the pond instead of walking around the pond. Do you see? Because a worm doesn't have any feet to walk, we're not going to use that language. We have to change it because we're pretending the worm is doing this activity now. So if we're slithering around the pond, and if you're a worm and you see a muskrat, does a worm know that that's what it's called, or is that just a furry animal by the water? Okay, so the worms are wiggling and slithering around the pond, and they see a furry animal near the water. If you're a teeny tiny worm, is the muskrat going to look regular size, or is it going to look pretty big? I think it would look pretty big if we were a teeny tiny little worm. So let's take the black part off here, and we will see what I came up with. So here we go. Now, friends, remember, I am just saying this exact same sentence that I have up here, but I'm thinking about it as if I was a worm doing that small moment, not a person. So if I was a worm, this might sound a little different. It might say something like this. Last week, Jamie and I wiggled our way out of our tunnels and slithered around a pond when we saw a giant furry animal. Okay? So it's the same small moment. I'm just telling it, I'm pretending that I'm a worm when I tell the story, okay? I want to think about how a worm would describe this exact same story. Right. Let me for a second. All right, let's do this from the perspective of the dog. So if you're a dog, yes, so you're going for a walk around a pond near your house. Dogs also have houses. Dogs normally don't walk by themselves, so maybe the owner is walking you. Is the dog gonna know what a muskrat is? Maybe it thinks it's another dog. Maybe it just thinks it's an animal and it has to get it. So if I'm telling the same story about Jamie and I walking around the pond, here's what it might sound like if I was telling it from a dog's perspective. What I have for the dog was last week, me and Jamie's owner took us for a walk near our house. We saw a little dog near some water. I barked and barked at him, but he swam away. Okay, so in this one, if we're thinking about being the dog, a lot of times you don't see dogs just walking around by themselves. They're with their owner. So I said that Jamie and I were walking with our owner because we're the dogs now. Okay? And when we're walking, maybe we see that little animal, the muskrat, but since we're dogs, we don't know that it's a muskrat. I just think it's another dog and I'm barking and barking at it. So I take the exact same situation that I've been talking about and I just try to think about it as if I was a dog. Okay, we want to change how we're telling the story so it's from the animal's perspective. All right, and let's see what we got for a tiger now. Um, I know that tigers probably don't just go out for walks. Um, I know that tigers like to eat meat, so maybe the tiger is hunting. So what I got for this one was last week, Jamie and I were hunting for lunch by a pond near our home. We saw a small animal that looked like an awesome lunch, but it swam away in the water. Okay. I don't even know if I like near our home. I'm going to say near the jungle because I know tigers live in the jungle. So I can change these little things so it sounds like the tiger is the one that's telling the story, not Mr. Ben the human, okay? So let's try to do this one more time. If we're a bird, is a bird going to go for a walk? Or what do birds do? They're going to fly. So that's going to be a big difference if you're telling this from the perspective of a bird. A bird would not be walking, a bird flies. So I wrote last week, Jamie and I were flying around a pond by our nest, and we saw a furry little animal eating in the water. Okay, so again, I just changed the story just a bit. Instead of walking, we were flying. Instead of near our house, we were near our nest because that is what birds live in. So that's a fact about a bird that we're putting into this made up story. All right. So I hope that's helpful for you guys when you're working through this process on your own. I'm only asking you to switch that one sentence small moment today. Let's change it for your animal, whatever that may be. That's the animal you've been learning about with Miss Jenny. So good luck. On the next video, I'll show you the exact slide that you're going to see in your own work today. So good luck.